Give us a second here. We're not ready. Need another second. And I have to run.
Shalom Aleichem. We'll talk about today about Issa Nesina L'Chatchila. So the emphasis we spoke about really the Issa Nesina L'Chatchila. We're going to talk about Ifanim that Nesina L'Chatchila is mutter. Let's just CHAZARA over. We spoke about last year what the Issa Nesina L'Chatchila is. I guess we can phrase the question that we know CHAZARA is mutter when you have the Tnoim of CHAZARA. Why is Nesina L'Chatchila worse than that? So we said last year, we said you could explain it one of three ways. Either you could say because the Issa CHAZARA is because of Chash Chitui. Mashenkein, if you're making a Nesina L'Chatchila, then it's Mechzikim Avashal. We saw the Balamor, HaRav goes that way. Or you could say this is Nesina L'Chatchila because of Chash Chitui. Even though CHAZARA is also Chash Chitui, but it's more of a Chash Chitui when you're doing the Nesina L'Chatchila. The third way was learn that they're both out Mechzikim Avashal, but there's more Mechzikim Avashal when you're starting off L'Chatchila on Shabbos and you're putting something there. Oh, so today I want to speak about they find that the Nesina L'Chatchila be mutter. For example, someone Shabbos morning wants to warm up challah, wants to warm up potato or chicken. Now, obviously, whenever you're talking about warming something up, we're talking about when there's no shayla bishul, something's a davi yovish, or it's a lachshan nistanen. Happens a lot of times. I get people tell me that they had an unexpected guest and they want to be able to have warm food for them. Question is there any oifin they can warm up food on Shabbos? When obviously there's no shayla bishul. So we're going to go through various I found and how it can be done, and show everything. I guess from the Makor Advarm, from the Sugis HaGemara and the Rishonim. So first thing is we have a Gemara in Shabbos Daf Mem. It says like this: Maybe Yodam Kitin Shamayim Umanicha Kidegan Hamadura Loy B'Shul Sheichama B'Shul Shetofik Sinasam. They let to put something Kidegan Hamadura as long as it's only Kadesh Shetofik Sinasam. That means it's only going to make it not so cold, but it's not going to make it hot. Shal the Paiskim. What happens if it could get hot, but you can take away before? That's the Shmuz and Shen Yud Ches. If there's Xera, we pass when there is. But the Shainim over there, the Ran and other Shainim say that the Gemara is discussing something that wasn't cooked. What happens if something was fully cooked? And the question is, are you allowed to put a Keneged Madura? Is there a problem mitzad the Islam Sin L'Chatchila? So the Ran says there's no Islam mitzad Sin L'Chatchila. Why not? Because he says, Ein derech bishul b'kach. It's not a derech bishul to put something Keneged Madura. You want to cook something, you put it directly on the fire. You don't put it Keneged Madura. And it means a raya, a simple raya. The halacha is that something, it's a mishnah, something is ready cooked, you're allowed to put it into a klivishin. I mean, it's not a klivishin like kabesh, you're allowed to put it into klivishin. Means you have a pot off the fire and you want to put something inside of it. So he says, how can it be mutter? The Teretz says that's not a derech basha when it's not on the fire. So therefore he says Keneged Madura is mutter. So the sprach of the Ran is because it's not derech bishul. This is the Ran L'Shitosoi that holds that the Isra Nesina L'Chatchila because of the Mechzikim Vashal. And here he's saying it's not Mechzikim Vashal. The Rosh, who can never hold that the problem of Nesina L'Chatchila is because there's a Chash Chitui, says the same idea but with a different sprach. He says that since it's Keneged Madura, I mean it's not Mamash by the Madura, it's Keneged Madura. So he says an interesting thing. The Gemara says Keneged Madura, not Eitzla Madura. That means there's a certain distance that you're taking away from the Madura. So that itself gives a person a hecker that is not going to come to Mechata. So how are you going to explain this halacha? That you're allowed to put something Keneged Madura and there's no Chash Chitui, or there's no problem of Mechzikim Vashal. We paskin this halacha. It's brought down in actually Siman Shin Yud Ches Sif Tes Vav. It says Dovish in the Spashal called Tzorkoi, Uyovish Mutal and Icha Neged Madura. I feel that Mokum Shias Letters Boy, even Mokum Shias Letters Boy is permitted to put. And Mishnah Berurah explains over there that even though Agav Eish is Nira Kamashal, Mashengi, you put a Keneged Madura, since people don't cook it that way, there's no problem of Nira Kamashal. Then he brings the Rosh, they have the Machik Sas, which is based on the Svara of Chash Chitu. Agaponim, so Eich Shia comes out Ladino. Someone has something that's fully cooked. Adav Yovish, let's say a challah, piece of chicken, piece of potato goggle, luxury goggle, even if it's stan lagamri, or dovalach that was cooked, but it's not in stan lagamri. These I found there's no issa bishul, so you're allowed to put it on the counter, even though it's going to get warm. It's next to fire. That's called Keneged Madura, and there wouldn't be an issue. The same idea would be, let's say you have a kedera, they took off the fire. Let's say you have soup, chicken soup. Now what you want to do is you want to put in lokshin. So lokshin was fully cooked. There's no problem to put the lokshin in the soup as long as it's not on the fire. You just have to be careful. Many times you take something out of the refrigerator, there's moisture that's from the refrigerator that was never cooked. So that could be a problem. We're talking about there's no moisture, that wouldn't be a problem. Put it on. Just to give a couple other examples of shilas of something with nichol, this het of filegre madura, different shilas that came up. A lot of times people have, let's say the oven is on, so it's very, very hot, the oven, but the stovetop also gets hot from the oven. So someone wants to know if you can put something on top of the stovetop to warm up on Shabbos. That's also, since that's not on the fire, that would be considered filegre madura, and there will be no isra sin lechatchila. I'm talking about even if we get yatz lettuce boy. But that's not by the Aish. It's connected Aish. It wouldn't be a problem. The same thing is there's a vent that there's steam that comes out from the oven. So that people want to put something next to the vent and it's going to get warm. Same thing, there wouldn't be any problem because that's called connected Madura. Another Eitzah, you could open up the oven door. Let's say the oven is on and you open up the oven door and you put something on the oven door itself. So that's obviously that's like connected Madura, but there's definitely heat coming out of the oven. And it can warm it up. Sometimes someone has a warming drawer on the bottom that's very hot, but the oven is not on. So you want to put something in the oven. So the oven gets sometimes hot because of the warming drawer. Right, that wouldn't be a problem. So I put the klal of all these things is one klal that since it's not by the fire itself, therefore it doesn't look, it's not the regular way you mavashal, mela ain't derech bishuvakach, mela it's mutter, or because there's no shashchitu, since you be machik sas meish. So all these afanim, there's no issa to put it on Shabbos mitzad issa of the sin lechatchila. But obviously, we're talking about something there's no problem bishul. That means everything is fully cooked. There's no moisture or anything else on it. One, that's the first heter of Nasin lechatchila, is putting something keneged and madura, which means not directly on the fire, next to the fire. And like we said, there's no issa Nasin lechatchila or mechsik mivash. There's no issa mitzad Nasin lechatchila yat mechsik mivash or also shashchi. The second oifin is like this. The Ran over there brings from the Rashba that the Rashba says that you're allowed to put on top of a pot, let's say a pot of cholent, you're allowed to put pandash. Pandash is something that was cooked. It's more like a tafshel, it's a dovi yovish. You want to warm it up. And he says, ain't derech bishul b'kach. It's not a derech bishul to warm something up on top of a pot. The Ran says that maybe something that is not a derech to bake on top of a kira. Where do you bake things? You bake things in an oven. Pandesh is something to put in an oven. Challah, where do you bake a challah? You bake a challah on the oven. You don't bake a challah on the stove top. So the Ran says that maybe such a type of thing will be mutter even on Gavi Eish Mamish. That means if someone wants to take a challah and there's a fire on the Eish and you want to put it directly on the fire, or let's say you put it in a pan on top of the fire to warm it up, the Ran says that even that might be mutter, because that's not derech bishul. You know what? Because no one cooks. You don't cook a challah, you don't cook a dovi yovish. The way you do is you put it in the oven. So since you're putting it in a totally different area, that's not the derech. The Ran says that maybe even that will be mutter. So the Rashba says that they put it on top of a pot that's on the fire. That's not the way to cook. And the Ran's moisif, there's something that's a pandash, that the derech is that you bake it in the oven. So by putting it on top of the stovetop, that maybe wouldn't be a problem, even if it's on top of the fire itself, not on top of the pot that's on the fire. Oh. Upon him, that's the shita of the Ran and the shita of the Rashba. In Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber in Siman Reish on Gimel Sefei says like this: Moto losses al pike Davis Chama b'Shabbos tavshol shem spashel me'er Shabbos b'tzorkoi en pandash yeis b'lechamam v'isha ein derech bishul v'kach. So Mechaber brings down this shiloh of putting something on top of a pot that's on the fire. So Mechaber clearly passes like the Rash, but not like the Ran. He doesn't allow you to put this pandash, even though it's not something that the derech is to put on top of a stovetop. It's a derech to put on in the oven. Still, the Mechaber only allows you to put it on top of a pot. But on top of a pot, the Mechaber says clearly in Reish and Gimel Sefei that it's mutter. So if someone would want to take something that's fully cooked, no matter what it is, a challah, potato kugel, chicken, whatever it is, and you want to put it on top of a pot that's cooking on the fire, there will be no problem. That's what comes out from the Mechaber Reish from Gimel Sif Hey. Now, there's a big kasha that all the Achronim ask. The Mechaber, this is the Mechaber Sif Hey. The Mechaber Sif Gimel says like this: Mota lite meichel agabe kdei rekonis hamunach agabe eish. That means if you have empty pot, you have an empty pot that's on the fire, so you can put something on top of it. But it's mafur, it's only going to help the CHAZARA. For example, let's say you already had a pot on the fire, and now your fire is burning. So what do? You take an empty pot, you put it on the wood, and you put the full pot on top of it. So straight in Shulchan Aruch, it's mutter. But it's mafur, it's only mutter when you have CHAZARA. If you put it on the ground, the Mechaber says, now you have a problem. So the question is, what is the difference between the two Mechabers? You have a Mechaber in Sif Gimel that tells you you're not allowed to put on top of a pot unless it was already there on the fire. That means it's only mutter midin CHAZARA. Either case, the Mechaber Sif Hey tells you you're allowed to put the pandash on top of the gedera that's on top of the fire. So the Yehuda and the Dogma Bava says that maybe the Mechaber in Sif Hey is only being soymich on the Ran. The Ran says that pandash, like we said, is not the derech the bake. Mela, that's why he was making a little bit in Sif Hey. The Bialocha says that really it's very shver because the Mechaber doesn't hold it around. According to Ran, you can put it on top of the kira. You can put it directly on the fire. So Mechat Eisef, the Mechaber doesn't mean down the Ran. He's being in the Rash, but there's only be making the of the Ran Svar also. So there is a Bialoch, there is a Prima Godim. We'll say over the way the Bialoch explains the Prima Godim. The Prima Godim says like this: that the chiluk between Sif Gimel and Sif Hey, that's you read in the Mechabers that way, is one's talking about putting something on top of a full pot, that you have a pot of chol that's on the fire, and one's talking about you have an empty pot that's on the fire. What's the difference between if it's empty pot or full pot? Zok to Bialocha in the Avona of the Prima Godim, it says like this: if you have a full pot, the way we see it is that you're putting something on a full pot. That's not the normal way to cook on a full pot. So therefore, it's ein derech bishul kach. But when you put on an empty pot, what we're looking at is the empty pot is a blech. You don't use a full pot as a blech, but we're looking at the empty pot as a blech. So basically, we're looking at it that you made a gar for cotton. Okay, maybe you didn't make the regular gar for cotton, but you made a gar for cotton. So therefore, we're looking at it as like basically put it on top of the fire with a gar for cotton. So Melo, in Sif Gimel, when it's an empty pot, all it's helping is that it's gar for cotton. You can make CHAZARA. But to make it a sin lechatchil, that will be awesome. Hashenkim, we coming to Sif Hey, when it's a pot that has cholent in it or something else, a soup, then it's mutter to make even a sin lechatchil. That's the Prima Godim's parents on the steer between Sif Gimel and Sif Hey, according to the way the Bialocha learns. So according to that, it will come out that if you have a pot of cholent on the fire, doesn't make a difference if you made a blech or not. If there was a head to leave the pot of cholent on the fire, now you want to warm something up on Shabbos. For example, you want to warm up Friday night or Shabbos day, you want to warm up challah, or you want to warm up some chicken, cook, whatever you want to warm up, as long as that thing is fully cooked and there's no shayla bishul, it's 100% mutter. But if it's on an empty pot, it comes out, there wouldn't be any heter. The shayla is like this: what happens if you have a blech? Now you want to put an empty pot on a blech? Would that be mutter? So there's a big mevucha in the paiskim. So this is true for the Shevet Levi, and the same idea is gebrach from Shlomo Zalman. That basically their idea is that the Bialocha explains that the Pshat of Prima Godim is that the reason why it's a problem by an empty pot is because we look at the pot, it's just the gar v'kotam of the fire. We don't look at it that's a pot here and now you're cooking not the derech bishul. We look at it as gar v'kotam. So based on that, they say that what happens if you have a blech, and now we have a pot. So the blech is one thing, and now the pot that's not matim to the blech. We don't look like it's one big blech because it's two separate things. So now the empty pot, we can look at it like a full pot. I mean, they say that it would be mutter. That's what the Shevet Levi and Shlomo Zalman say. Now, there's two ways how to argue on what they're saying. There's one way to argue is that you could say that we look at, since everything is empty, there's no food, we look at it as one big blech, even if it's not exactly the same size. That's I once spoke to Shlomo Miller about the Shaila 20 years ago, and he told me, I asked him if you're allowed to do this, and he says, it's doch ein großer blech. We should look at it as one big blech. There's another way that you could argue, this whole Dion is all going according to Mr. Brewer's Havon the Premier Garden. That the chiluk between an empty pot and a full pot is that a full pot, we don't see, we see Ein Derech Bishul. Actually, empty pot, we see this as Gorfa Cotton. The Chazon Ish has a different take, a different Havana in the Premier Garden. The way the Chazon Ish learns that the chiluk in the Premier Garden between an empty pot or full pot is, when you have a full pot, the Metzias is that the top of the pot doesn't get so hot. Why? Because the heat of the fire that's under that's going to cook up the food in the pot. So therefore, it doesn't get so hot. And that's what makes it in there Bishop Kach. By saying when you have an empty pot and there's no food that's getting cooked in there, the Metzias says it gets much hotter. And therefore, there's no heter. So according to the Chazon Ish, Dr. Yashiv, it comes out that there's no heter, even if it's an empty pot on top of a blech. Why? Because you have the same chasar. The chasar of empty pot is not because then we see it as a blech. The nakuda is because since there's no food in between, the heat doesn't have a place to land, and the heat is going to come on the top. I mean, it's going to be much hotter. So getting back to the Shiloh, that the halacha brings to the Pri Megadim, that putting food on top of a full pot is mutter. Putting food on an empty pot is going to be also. The question is, what about putting food on an empty pot that's on a blech? Is that going to be mutter or not? So, if the svara of the Pri Megadim is the way that the halacha understood it, because we're looking at it as the empty pot as gorva cotton. So if I have a blech, and on top of the blech, I have an empty pot. So you can't say empty pot is the blech. Blech is the blech. An empty pot should serve the same purpose as the full pot. That was the way Shevet Levi and Shlomo Zalman understood. Midachisa, you could argue, first of all, like I said over Shlomo Miller, that maybe you could say that we look at everything as one big blech. Or this whole halacha is going according to the bialachas. Everything's going according to the bialachas havana in the Pri Megadim, that the chiluk is that we see the empty pot as a blech. But Chazon Ish has a different take, and he says the main nakud is because when there's a full pot, the food is absorbing the heat. Ashay empty pot, not. There wouldn't be chiluk if there's an empty pot on top of blech or not. What comes out is that they put food that was fully cooked to warm it up on Shabbos on a full pot, 100% mutter. On an empty pot, that's in vor in the bialacha, that's awesome. But to put an empty pot on a blech, that, like I said, the machlek is shnuyim. I just want to point out that even the Shevet Levi that was mekel is only putting. I once heard someone tell someone that you could put the gedera on top of a blech. So the person said, "Oh, I'll take two pans, put it upside down. The first pan will be the blech, and the second pan will be the gedera." That's not going to work. Shevet Levi says very clear. The nakuda is that I have a blech, and then I put a gedera, so they're not matim, two different sizes, so we could see that gedera is something else. But about if you have a pan, one pan, another pan, about everyone's going to be massive shleimil as far that we look at as one big garva cut. So really, the right thing is that you shouldn't do this eitzah. But if there's a big tzarich, there's definitely a mokum to mekel, like the Shevet Levi says, because Bemis there really is there's another siruf over here. What's a siruf? There is a sheet of the Magen Avram in Shin Yud Ches that you learn good the Magen Avram over there. It's the Magen Avram and Sifkot and Chavav. It's over there that he has a different way to miyashiv the steer between Sif Gimel and Sif Hey. The way the Magen Avram is miyashiv is that Sif Hey is talking about a dover yavish. Mashang is Sif Gimel is a dover lach. By dover lach, since if it's nistanen, it's going to be a problem bishul. So maybe there's a gzeira. We don't allow you to put it on top of to make an asil lachatchila. Only make CHAZARA. So obviously it's still hot. That's the way the Magen Avram answers the stira. The Magen Avram says that according to the Machaba comes out that putting even a dover yovish on a kedera kolos would be much. That's what comes out from the Magen Avram. But a dover lach would be also even a kedera melaya. And the Magen Avram himself says that he dings on the Mechaber based on the Magen Mishnah, and he holds even a dover lach would be mutter. So according to the Magen Avram, everything is mutter, even on a kedera kolos. So it comes out we have a choshev of Magen Avram in the Sarif. You learn over there Shin Yud Ches. You see the Mishnah Berurah. The Magen Avram is based on a stira between the Mechaber and Sif Zayin and Sif Ches. The Mishnah Berurah over there goes with the goyim teretz. Mainly doesn't have the hecher that whole Magen Avram. Like a part of that is another choshev of siruf that if there is a tzarich besides what the Shevet Levi is saying, you have this siruf of the Magen Avram. It's kind of interesting in the last madur of the Shevet Levi when he had a lot of horus on the side. He is over there on the Gillian. the tak is mitzaref that bemis is another tzir here. This is Mogen Avram. Akaponim, what comes out is that they put the marshal a challah. That's most of the times the people have a shiloh challah on a putting it, for example, on top of a cholent crackpot. That would be mutter the kuli amlo since the k'ter malaya. Same thing, any other davar yavish. But if you want to put a pot on top of blech, like that's not so kosher. But makom tzarich is what to be saying. I just want to point out two zayte gezachim that when you're putting a challah, for example, on top of a cholent pot, you have to be careful. Sometimes people take the challah out of the freezer, and we take it out of the freezer. Many times there's crystals there. There's crystals of frozen particles there, and that could be a shiloh bishul. If you're putting it on top of the blech, you're cooking that. That was never cooked. There could be another shiloh. If the challah is going to get to matzah crisp, it could be a shiloh sliach hafiyas. I don't want to get into that. Much when you learn bishul, you see that. It could be another issue that we're putting a challah on top of a crackpot. It could be a shiloh making fleishig challah. So if you're planning eating the challah for that suda, that the halacha is that it's pas mut, so that suda is not a problem. But someone is going to use that challah for later on, the shalshudas, so he's going to save it for during the week. So the sacrilege pickle the problem. So you shouldn't do that. So the best thing is you should put a piece of silver foil in between, and then there wouldn't be any problem. That's the second head that we have, that the Nasin Lechatchila is mutter to put it on a Kader Malaya, on a Kader Rekonis it's also, but Kader Rekonis on top of Blech, we said that's a Shiloh. Now, the third thing is like this. What about putting on top of a Blech? So in Halacha, the Blech, there's three Mekaymis on the Blech. It's like if Kam Vakam Halachas, it's going to come from other places also. Let's just define there's three places on the Blech. There's one place on the blech, the mokum eish. That means directly on top of the fire. Because a lot of times people have a blech, they only leave one fire on, but the heat spreads to the rest of the blech. Then you have the part of the blech that's not directly on the fire, but it's yatzaletus by there. There's a third place in the blech, sometimes all the way at the end, that's not even yatzaletus by. So Moshe has many truvas, and Moshe talks about all different shas of blech. But what comes out from the Moshe's truvas is like this. That they put something l'chatchila on the blech, b'mokim she'en yatz let us play. That's 100% mutter. At Bemis, you have the Ramah. It's a base. The Ramah says that even in the kira, the town of Samokim, that's not can't get the yatz let us play. That's not a problem. There's no issue sin l'chatchila. But so that's the guy with sin l'chatchila. What about the guy with CHAZARA? Moshe says something very interesting. He says like this: let's say you had a pot that was agabe ish benish moshes. In the beginning of Shabbos, or on the blech mokim that could come to Yatzalatus point, and then you removed it from there and you put it onto the blech, the place that's not Yatzalatus boy. Then he says you're allowed to put it back. Why? Because you have the tziruf of the ran. Spoke about the sheet of the ran. The ran holds there's no t'nai chazara on Shabbos. It says even though we don't pass like the ran, but this is better because the ran's case is you put a gabi karka. There was a silah, but over here by blech, there's a sword to say that there was no silah. So Moshe says that if you take something off the fire or off the mokum says yatz let us boy and bring it onto the blech, the place that's not yatz let us boy, it would be mutter to put it back on the fire or onto the mokum that's yatz let us boy, as long as obviously it's still hot, that is a davalach. If you took it off before Shabbos, then you don't have the tzir for the ran, then he would hold that it's awesome. So what comes after Moshe is when you get our shayla sin lechatchila, you want to warm something up, and you have a place in the blech that can't even get to yatz lettuce boy. That'll be mutla lechatchila on Shabbos to put the item there. But if you have something that was already on the fire, and you want to take it off the fire. It's a lot of time. Let's say someone has a cholent, and you're afraid it's going to burn, so you want to take it off directly the fire, and you want to move it to a place in the blech that's yatz lettuce boy. That's zechemot. Not only that, you can move even the place on the blech that's not yatz lettuce boy. And then right before the Suda, move it back. It's not enough kamina also. There's halacha that you're not allowed to take out something directly on the fire. Marshal, let's say you have a chol that's on the fire, you're not allowed to take out directly when it's on the fire. Loim boy, you're not allowed to mix. The Mishnah Gur brings down in Shin Yud Ches and the Shin Yud Ches. It could be a shayla hagos, it could be a shayla v'isa deraisa, but chaytzah b'kaf is zechor also midrabana, according to what the Mishnah Gur goes. There's a question, the Paiskim, is Yitzhak Bekaf only when it's Agabe Eish Mamish, or even on the Blech, but Makar Shiatz Levis. This is Machoikis, showing you learn Shin Yud Ches, you see that Machoikis. But that's for sure. That's only on a Makar Shiatz Levis, but it's a Makar Sheni Yatz Levis, the Zichar no Isser of Yitzhak Bekaf. So then, according to this Ramesha, they allowed to take something off the fire and put it on the blech to Mokim Sheni Yas Levis boy. So you have a Posha Eitz, if you have a big pot and you want to be able to take something out of it and be able to put it back. The Posha Eitz, you take it off the fire and put it on the blech to Mokim Sheni Yas Levis boy, and then take it out and then put it back. So by Shaul, there's no problem putting it back in the Chagava. One more Shiloh is Benigeya, a hot plate. We spoke about a while back. There's a question about a hot plate that only has one dial. If there's an isser to be mash over there, is there a gzeira of it like a loy plug or not? But on the side that there's no loy plug, and it would be mutter to make sure you're there. The question is, can you make nesin l'chatchila? So my holds you can make nesin l'chatchila on such a mokim. As long as obviously it only has one setting. Shabbos argues, it says CHAZARA you can make, but not nesin l'chatchila. But Sa'avad l'chatchila you shouldn't do it. Well, Marshall, let's say you want to put, people a lot of times ask, could they put an empty pot on top of that? That's you could be mako, because Marshall you making nesin l'chatchila. Now you want to put empty pot, which that we said the Magen Avraham holds would be mutter, so that would be fine. So let's make a sikum of what came out today. So Kitza, we came out like this. There's an Isra Sin L'Chatchila, which means that you're not allowed to take something L'Chatchila out of the refrigerator anywhere you want, even if it's fully cooked. There's no problem with Bishul, because it's either Mexican Bashil or of Chash Chito. So that you're not allowed to put it on the fire. And really, we said last week, I think, 2 weeks ago, that anytime you're missing the Torah CHAZARA, that lives like in the Sin L'Chatchila. The question is, what are they finding that a person would be allowed to make a nesin l'chatchila on Shabbos? That means, how could you warm something on Shabbos if you want to warm it up? So we said, Kamai Fan. One thing is based on the Gemara. The Gemara says the Keneged Amadura. The Shainim say Keneged Amadura is going to be a problem only if something is not fully cooked, or something is fully cooked. You're allowed to put it Keneged Amadura, either because it's not the official to cook something Keneged Amadura, or because the fact it's only Keneged Amadura, not Eitz Lamadura, there's no Chash Chitui. And we said a lot of practical examples of that would be putting something on a counter next to the fire, or putting something in a kli rishon that was taken off the fire. For example, putting noodles into a soup that was taken off the fire. We said you could put something on top of the stovetop. If the oven is on, you could put something on a stovetop next to where the vent is. You could put something on the oven door that's open, put something in the oven. If the warming drawer is on, all these cases that vibes like Keneged Amadura. It's not the derech bishul, and there's a hecker, and therefore there's no chash chitui, and that will be mutter. The second item we said was that it's more in the rash, but that I put something on a kedera that's on the fire, there's no problem. And we said that that's only if it's a kedera malaya, like the four in Machabit Sefhei. Kedera konis is awesome. We said two ways how to understand that. Either way, Mishabur understands that is because kedera konis we see it as gar for kotu, or the way the Chaznish understands it because only when it's kedera malaya, the food absorbs the heat. We said an afgemina is with the Sheva Levi Shaila. Could you put the Kedera Bikonis on top of blech, put something on it? According to the Mishnah Burika Klet, then maybe it's mutter. Hashenkein, according to Chaznish, the Asher says Avada would be also. Then we spoke about putting something on a blech, on a place that's not Yad lettuce boy, that's mutter, like Ramosha says. Or putting on the place the Yad lettuce boy, that's going to be also. Something that was already on the fire or on the blech as mokum sheyatz lettuce boy, that would be permitted to move to blech to mokum that's not yatz lettuce boy. Like Moshe says, there's no problem if chazor back to that place. Maybe if someone wants to take something off the fire and be able to put it back, but he can't hold it, that would be a way to dish out and put into the place that's not yatz lettuce boy. Or someone wants to, he's afraid it's going to burn, and he wants to leave it over there for a while. All these afanim would be motor. And the same thing on a hot plate, we said there's machlekes if it has one dial, one setting, if you're allowed to put it on there l'chatchila. But zichur, if you put a kedera konis on top of that, zichur, you can be makel, since we said the sheet of the Magen Avraham is always on top of kedera konis, is motor. These are the ifanim. Someone wants to warm something up on Shabbos, You could either warm it up, like we said, Keneged Madura, which is koilel on the counter, or in a pot that has food in it, as long as it's not on the fire, or in the oven if the oven's not on, even though it's hot because of the warming drawer, on top of the stove top if the oven is on, or having the oven door open, or you can put on top of a pot that's on the fire. B'shas Chak, we said even a Kedei Rekonis, that's on top of a blech, or you could put it on top of a hot plate with a Kedei Rekonis. All these are fanim. It would be mutter to make an asina l'chatchil. Okay, we'll stop here, and Mitzvah will be mamshech. We can talk about that tomorrow. I know I spoke very quick. Try slowing down.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Beautiful spoon. Maybe one to come for me.
I made two.
You made two, you made one in the middle, right?